What do you think of when you think of a film critic? For me, it's these guys, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. When I was growing up, my family lived in Chicago, and we watched them every weekend on their TV film review program, Siskel and Ebert at the Movies. Because they were based in Chicago, I also read their reviews in the newspaper every weekend in the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune. This was usually the highlight of my week growing up, and I thought their jobs were so cool. I wanted to be them when I grew up. Siskel and Ebert were great writers and skilled critics, and the world owes them a massive debt, without a doubt. The only part of their legacies I take issue with, however, is also the most iconic element, the thumbs up, thumbs down format that was part of their TV show. On one hand, having a grading system for a film review is a helpful way of making a quick choice about where to spend your time and money. But the other side of that coin is how it conditions us to think about art as something we either like or don't like. We give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down when the reality of the work that we're judging is far more complex and can't always be easily distilled into good or bad. The complexity of art and storytelling is something that Roger Ebert also understood. While his TV reviews with Gene Siskel were usually brief, his writing contains some of the best informed and compassionate thoughts about cinema that you can find. In a 2005 speech, he said the following: "For me, the movies are like a machine that generates empathy. If it's a great movie, it helps us to identify with the people who are sharing this journey with us." Roger Ebert believed that movies help us see the world differently. I believe that too, because I know that human beings are wired for story, and that informs how we navigate the world at large. I experience this in my work as a film critic and how I see audiences react to stories on a screen, and in my work as a marketer at the KU Edwards campus, where I try to engage prospective students with a story that helps them see our campus as a great place to learn. But the truth is that everything we engage with in our lives, the politicians and organizations we support, the beliefs we hold, the friends we choose, our clothes, even our food, has a story. When we engage with diverse stories and understand them, I believe that we make better, more informed choices and lead richer lives. However, far too often, we reduce the stories we surround ourselves with into a surface level dichotomy of good and bad. Thumbs up, thumbs down. By doing that, we avoid exposing ourselves to ideas, perspectives, and ways of being that affect how we understand the world. So what I'd like to do tonight is to help you understand the way that critics, the people whose job it is to ask hard questions about our culture's popular forms of storytelling, see the world, and how that model contains lessons that can help us all become better, more informed citizens. So the idea that stories have a strong impact on our behavior isn't just a theory. It's actually backed up by research. First of all, stories help humans trust each other and work together because humans absorb ideas best through storytelling. Researchers at Harvard found that presenting test subjects with character-driven narratives through video produced oxytocin, a neurochemical that signifies safety or trust in the brain and motivates cooperative behavior. According to Dr. Paul Zak, who conducted this study, stories sustain our attention through narrative tension, and then use that tension to get us to generate empathy with the characters. So given this, it might not come as a huge surprise that film and TV have been shown to be effective social and practical teaching tools. A study at the University of Manchester in 2019 found that practicing critical thinking skills in the classroom by watching and critiquing films helped English as a foreign language students increase their critical thinking ability in their writing. Research at MIT on parasocial relationships, or the ways that we become emotionally attached to fictional characters, shows that positive depictions of underrepresented groups in TV and film help us have positive attitudes towards diverse populations. You could apply this idea to a movie like Black Panther, which not only empowered Black audiences, but gave other audience members a strong, creative, and positive depiction of Black identity. Films can also give us fictional models for dealing with real-world situations. Earlier this year, a study was released in which researchers at the University of Chicago and Aarhus University in Denmark found that fans of horror films felt more psychologically equipped to handle the COVID-19 pandemic than non-horror fans. I wrote an article about this study a couple of months ago, and I spoke to one of the researchers who conducted it, Matthias Claesen. He told me the following theory about his findings. When we watch movies or read novels, we're not just killing time. We're actually charting the huge metaphorical landscape of possible worlds and hypothetical scenarios. What's special about horror is that genre lets us chart the dark areas of that landscape, the pits of terror and the caves of despair. So here's a real life example of Clayson's theory in action. For this same article, I spoke to a filmmaker based here in Kansas City, Jill Gevargizian. She shared a story with me about watching the horror movie The Babadook after her father's death. The Babadook is a movie about a woman whose husband dies in a car accident during her pregnancy, and she has difficulty connecting with her young son because of that trauma. The monster that enters their lives is a metaphor for the main character's grief and depression. Jill said that she felt the movie accurately portrayed the feeling of processing a major loss and how that grief becomes something you have to find a way to coexist with. The movie helped her recognize that the loss of someone important in your life isn't something you can just get over. She told me it's something that changes you and lives with you. So now that we know what stories can do for us, how do we help them do their best work? I'd like to posit that we do that by thinking like film critics and using some of the same mental tools that a critic uses to think about the stories we encounter every day. Now, the popular understanding of film criticism is that we tell prospective viewers whether a film is worth seeing or not. Now, this is one function of what we do, but in my view, it's not the most important. Our job isn't to apply a strict set of rules to the way a movie should function. What we're actually doing is practicing critical analysis, which is a form of critical thinking, to help give viewers a framework of how to consider what they watch. Critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue, or in this case, a movie, in order to form a judgment. Critical analysis takes that process and applies it to writing a review. The goal here isn't to tear a movie apart, but to help interpret and evaluate the elements that make it work on a visual, entertainment, and messaging level. So here are some elements of critical analysis that I might consider when I'm reviewing a film. The first is my initial reaction, how the movie made me feel, if I enjoyed it or if I was turned off by it. Then there's analysis and interpretation. What do I think it meant? If the movie asks any big questions, how might I answer them? I might also consider a work's critical context. When was it made? By whom? How does that perspective come through? And finally, I consider the aesthetic or rhetorical expression of the creator's vision. What was the screenwriter or director trying to say? How did they choose to say it, and how well did that work? A lot of these same concepts apply to the idea of media literacy, which we use to analyze everything from fictional TV programs to advertising to the news. Media literacy teaches that all media messages are constructed using a specific set of rhetorical or visual rules to tell a story with a specific message, and that not everyone is going to react to the story being told in the same way. So while applying the structure of critical analysis, I, as a critic, might ask myself the following questions. First, who created this message? Who is the director? Who wrote the script? What do I know about them? What creative techniques are being used to attract my attention? This could be cinematography, set design, sound, editing, anything that helps define the way a movie looks and feels. How might other people understand or engage with the message differently from me? Here we're looking at audiences and how different population groups react to a specific movie. What values, lifestyles, or points of view are represented in or omitted from this message? Basically, whose perspective are we getting? Whose story is actually being told, and what's the point of that story? And finally, why is this message being sent? What's the movie's reason for being? Is there a specific call to action? Is there an underrepresented perspective you're being asked to consider? A historical figure whose legacy you should question or be inspired by? Here we're trying to figure out what the end goal is, even if that goal is just to make you feel good and buy an action figure. So to illustrate how this process works, let's use the 2017 movie Wonder Woman as an example. Now, this was a movie that had a strong impact on me when it first came out. I remember crying during the press screening, not once, but twice, and I'm not the only person who had this reaction. There were numerous examples of other female audience members around the world who had intense emotional reactions to this movie. So what was going on? Well, first, the director, Patty Jenkins, is a woman, and she was the first woman to direct a big-budget superhero movie. I could see that the female perspective was present throughout the movie in the way that she directed action scenes that highlighted her athletic female cast. That wasn't a perspective I was used to seeing on that scale, and as a woman, I found that thrilling. Wonder Woman is defined throughout by themes of female empowerment, relationship, and justice, which felt true to the legacy of that character. From a commercial perspective, the goal may have been to sell a lot of tickets and merchandise. But from an artistic standpoint, the goal was to treat an iconic female character as independent and complex. For many women, myself included, these were powerful ideas that spoke directly to us in a way they might not have for male viewers. It's important that we consider these questions and perspectives because right now we're watching movies and TV more than ever. This year, Nielsen reported that time spent on streaming services at the beginning of the pandemic grew by 34%. An online market research study found that 75% of survey respondents were watching more streaming content than before the pandemic struck. A media watchdog group study in the UK found that during the pandemic, 12 million people joined a streaming service they hadn't used previously, and 3 million started streaming content for the very first time. That's a lot of stories with a lot of messages coming at us with greater frequency than we're used to. And as we've demonstrated, all that viewing isn't necessarily passive. To bring it back to our friend Roger Ebert, every time we watch a movie, we're engaging in a machine that generates empathy. We are potentially discovering new ways of engaging with the world, whether or not we realize it. To make that machine do its best work, we have to be actively involved. We need to be asking questions about the things we watch and going beyond the surface level. We need to think like critics. Knowing how to ask important questions about the stories we're given, who's telling them, and why are crucial when it comes to making big decisions and interacting with others. When we start thinking like critics, I believe we can actually improve not just our own lives, but the world. Thank you.